Of all the things we have not expected to be on our 2025 bingo card, I would say that a discussion about reopening the federal penitentiary at Alcatraz Island is certainly one of the most not on our bingo card to date. Originally a military installation throughout the 19th and early 20th century, Fort Alcatraz was converted into a prison in the year 1934. It was considered a home for the worst of the worst, meaning if you couldn't handle being in a standard prison, Alcatraz was where you would ultimately end up. The prison was eventually closed down in the 1960s before being designated a National Historic Site in 1972. These days, you can board a ferry at San Francisco's Pier 33 and visit the prison for yourself, as well as taking a guided tour of the old facilities. Madeline had the pleasure of attending one of these tours on a school field trip about 20 years ago, and that is where she happened to pick up this. Yes, she has a revised 1956 copy of the Institution Rules and Regulations, which I am currently borrowing from her, and is what we shall be discussing in today's video. You see, while the prison had a reputation of fear in its heyday, when you peel back the curtain, life at Alcatraz was surprisingly fair and humane. In fact, it was even more humane than some of the detention facilities we see in the modern day, something which, if you haven't been paying attention, is fast becoming a matter of grave concern for the humans occupying this country. So, in typical fashion on this channel, let's talk about it. The Institution Rules and Regulations Handbook was issued to each inmate the moment they stepped off the boat. It is a 19-page document with a total of 53 rules and procedures. In order to better get through them, we can classify these rules into 8 categories, which shall appear on screen right now. Starting the list off are those rules which apply to your status as an inmate. Number 13, the registry, states that you are to be identified by your full name and your prisoner ID number, but that while on the grounds, officers will address you only by your surname. 32 and 34 apply to your uniforms, both standard and for work, as well as haircuts and shaving. Number 36 applies to illnesses and injuries by declaring your right to attend sick call, while number 48 grants you the right to attend religious services, though only if you are Christian or Jewish. From there, we get into the expectations of living on Alcatraz Island. Number 5 is the most well-known rule. You are entitled to food, clothing, shelter, and medical attention. Anything else that you get is a privilege. Let us now examine number 28, your daily routine. It is a rather comprehensive list, with wake up on weekdays usually occurring at 7 a.m. and final daily lockup at 5:30 p.m. Work call would be at 8 a.m., with work usually beginning by 8:40 a.m. Most work duties would end at approximately 4:40 p.m., with a break provided for lunch, usually around noon. Weekends and holidays had a bit more leniency, allowing inmates to sleep in for an extra 15 minutes and to spend those days in the yard before returning to final lockup at 4:40 p.m. Due to this timetable difference, dinner was at 4:40 on weekdays, but 4 o'clock on weekends and holidays. Rule 29 corresponds to bathroom rules. Most inmates were expected to bathe and swap out their laundry on Tuesdays and Saturdays, while inmates who worked culinary were required to do so on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Rule 30 pertains to rules within the cell house, which was the living quarters of the inmates. All of an inmate's personal property within their cell was meticulously itemized, and any unauthorized items would be confiscated, though more on that later. Moving right along, Rule 33 applies to dining procedures and etiquette, Rule 37 to roll call lineup and escort from place to place, and Rule 38 reiterated the protocols for issuing or reissuing supplies, something also discussed throughout the previous rules. Really, this category of rules was the most important for you as an inmate to survive the day-to-day experience of residing at Alcatraz. If you couldn't handle this much, then you could expect to have a very bad time. That said, once you got used to it, the remaining rules were all very simple and straightforward. Rules 23, 24, and 35 all pertain to requesting communications with prison officers. You could do this to ask for general information or to make suggestions of how prison life could be better. Rule 27 even allowed you to send classified mail to outside government officials, such as the Attorney General or the Parole Board, to report any issues which might require oversight from a neutral third party. This fundamental right to privacy in one's written correspondence was notably essential, as the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, even at a prison such as Alcatraz. Being able to report acts of cruelty was a safeguard which assured the officers, too, were kept in line. Lastly, for this category, Rule 43 gave inmates the option to either represent themselves in matters of law or to have a lawyer assigned to their case. Again, these are protections under the 5th and 6th Amendments of the United States Constitution. While most of your interactions as an inmate would be limited to representatives of the legal system, this did not prevent you from still having some general communication with the outside world. Rule 41 allowed you to write letters to anyone on your approved mailing list, though general mail would be screened by prison officials. Rule 49 allowed you to make purchases of approved items, such as educational materials, musical instruments, or magazines. We'll talk about money in the next section, but the final rule of note here was number 51, allowing you to have one visitor a month and visits by your legal counsel as granted by the associate warden. So far, everything that has been listed has been rather tame, making it seem as though the island was simply a hotel you could not check out from. Sorry, bit of an attempt at humor there. But that being said, as an inmate, you were still there to repay your debt to society, and boy howdy, were you going to have to work in order to earn it. Rule 21 mandated that you would work 40 hours per week in any job which had been assigned to you by the associate warden under Rule 39. Rules 25 and 26 dictated the terms of your compensation. Earnings from your work would go into a prisoner's trust fund, a personal savings account, though it bore no interest. Inmates could use this money to pay legal fees, make approved purchases, or send money to dependents outside the prison. Upon leaving the prison, any unspent money would of course be yours to keep. Granted, this monetary compensation amounted to only a few cents per hour, maybe $1 per week, which in today's money would be closer to $12 per week. But considering that in today's money, inmates earn up to 40 cents per hour, or $16 per week, the difference was clearly less than one might expect from the highest security prison in America during the 1950s. Now, considering that one cannot survive upon work alone, the prison did offer a surprising amount of amenities to these very prisoners. Rule 20 dictated weekends and holidays to be recreation days. Recreation included an auditorium, see Rules 40 and 45, where movies could be watched twice per month, and religious services could be held as mentioned previously. Rule 42 governs the yard, which is where inmates could play ball or conduct table games, although gambling was strictly prohibited. Rule 44 covers the library, where books and magazines could be regularly checked out. Rules 46 and 47 are centered around the use of musical instruments, as well as radio headsets, as inmates could listen to radio programs while lounging in their cell. And then there is Rule 50, regarding the use of tobacco dispensers at a time before humans realized just how harmful smoking is to the body. We only have two categories left to discuss, and these last two are very closely tied together. They cover bad behavior and good behavior, which, when taken together, are the key to determining the kind of life you would have as an Alcatraz inmate. Starting with Rule 6, poor conduct translates to loss of privileges, period. Rule 7 states that if your conduct is bad enough, you'll be sent to the treatment unit, which is code for solitary confinement. And if it's really bad conduct, Rule 8 specifies that you could find yourself back in a courtroom before you realize it. Rules 9 and 10 pertain to good time, which is part of sentence commutation. Just know that bad behavior revokes this time, and it would take an entire year of good behavior just to get it reinstated. All documented cases of bad behavior end up in your personal record, as per Rule 15. As far as specifics, Rules 16, 17, and 19 all cover the possession and distribution of unauthorized personal property, also known as contraband. All contraband gets seized, and all persons involved with its distribution are to be punished equally. You then have Rule 18, which is a zero-tolerance policy against intimidation. Rule 22, which is zero tolerance against loitering. And finally, you have Rule 53. This final rule gives the warden carte blanche to set policy within the prison to uphold public order, and the warden's rule is the supreme law. If you, as an inmate, are able to abide by these rules and perform your duties to the fullest extent that you can, not only will you need not worry about discipline, but you can start to accumulate good time, which is the final and most important category of them all. For this, we need to start with Rule 52, the Good Time Law, United States Code. Title 18, Section 4161 states that each prisoner convicted of an offense against the United States and confined in a penal or correctional institution for a definite term other than life, whose record of conduct shows that he has faithfully observed all the rules and has not been subjected to punishment, shall be entitled to a deduction from the term of his sentence, beginning with the day on which the sentence commences to run. Usually, this is 5 to 10 days per month, depending on a person's total sentence length. For example, let's say you were sentenced to 7 years at Alcatraz, and you had good behavior from day 1. You would earn 8 days per month, or 96 days per year, and after 5 years, you would have earned 480 days, or 16 months. At that time, you would have only 8 months left of your sentence, as opposed to a full 2 years. Therefore, it was always in your best interest to be on your best behavior. Rules 1 through 4 give broader definitions for this good behavior. Rule 11 stipulates that you could even be transferred out of Alcatraz entirely and back into a regular prison even before your sentence was finished. And Rule 12 was a clemency rule for military prisoners. Finally, Rule 14 is essentially the same as Rule 15, in that good behavior gets reported on your prisoner record. Well, there you have it. All 53 rules of the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. As stated from the beginning, when you put it on paper, everything listed is incredibly tame compared to the conditions of some modern detention facilities, which is a bit of a terrifying prospect in itself. Accusations abound of detention centers operated by U.S. immigrations and customs enforcement being subject to violations of both constitutional law and of human rights standards. You have denial of legal counsel, withholding of medical treatment, excessive use of solitary confinement, and most damning of all, an inability to contest these brutal conditions. Detention officers are accused of rampant racial and sexual misconduct, and while Alcatraz inmates and even military prisoners had the fundamental right of classified reporting to the nation's top prison authorities, those incarcerated at these detention facilities have no such right. One such facility in Arizona has seen 16 deaths since 1994, which is half the number of deaths had at Alcatraz over its entire 30-year history. Statistics of this nature ought to be inexcusable. How is it that a facility meant to house people for the mere crime of entering the United States unlawfully has a worse human rights track record than a literal island stronghold meant to house the worst of the worst criminals to ever exist? How is it that those hardened criminals had movie nights and access to radio, and these detainees sometimes lack access to drinking water? And that is where we wish to leave this video. If Alcatraz were to be reopened in the year 2025, we would hope, or at least expect, that the conditions at Alcatraz be more humane than they were in 1956 when this handbook was revised. If the government is unable to meet that particularly low bar, then, well, maybe they shouldn't be incarcerating people in the first place. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in future videos.